requires us to acquire some way or another a small portion of land at 113 Old Post. So the town engaged Creighton Manning Engineering to prepare a design for the project. That includes the acquisition of 3,380 square feet. An appraisal puts the value of that property at about $17,000. We have made attempts to come to a resolution of this with the owners of the property, and we've had good faith discussions on both sides. Nevertheless, we haven't been able to come to terms, and so an offer of purchase was made for the 17, but that was not accepted, and therefore we need to proceed with this eminent domain procedure law matter. That being said, I hasten to add that we're not closed off to discussions with the owner. I've notified the owner that although we're proceeding with this matter, that we're open to discussion to see if we can kind of resolve this without having to need to go to a conclusion on the legal matter. We have a resolution that we adopted on December 7th, Resolution 175, that the project is an unlisted action under SECRA. We determined that there were no significant environmental impacts that would result from the action. So to begin this hearing, I'd first like to introduce the map of the of the acquisition of property on Old Post and Route 9. Jen, do you have that map? Okay, so let's mark that somehow as a part of this hearing, maybe Exhibit 1. And the next, before we take public comment on it, I'd like to hear from a few people. And first, Chris from Creighton Manning Engineering. Chris, if you could just comment on the project and the proposal that that you've prepared for us in the map. And there's been some particular discussions about drainage from the road and how that might be impacted. And I think your plan accommodates that. So would you mind just addressing that for the board and for the public?
Yeah, no problem. You hit on most of the points. It's a traffic improvement project. We're trying to improve the level of service out there. The plans to date have gone to DOT. DOT has signed off on the signal modifications. We just modified the signal for the right turn lane. Just involved that in a right turn only sign on the overhead existing span wire. So DOT has looked at that, reviewed it. They had no comments on it. They had one, bigger comment on the location of the signal pole, but we were able to tweak some of the right turns and some of the edge of the pavement to get there. They wanted about a 3 to 6 foot separation from the pole. So we did that. So DOT is on board with the work in the DOT right-of-way, which is a big piece. Like I say, we are widening the roadway. We had some utility impacts. National Grid has moved their poles out of the way, so their work is complete, and Verizon Wireless has to move their equipment, and will be next. They'll be within 3 or 4 weeks. They can move their stuff once they get the go-ahead. But yeah, as you mentioned, a bigger piece on it is taking care of the stormwater runoff with the drainage. Our initial plan, I think probably 6 months ago when we first presented the project, was to keep the roadway as it was, widen it 10 feet, and the stormwater was going to sheet flow off the roadway onto the adjoining property. Soon after that meeting, that initial meeting here, we had a meeting with the property owners, engineers, and they requested that the drainage be closed up in some fashion to remove the stormwater onto his property. So soon after that, we closed up the drainage and we put in a stormwater pipe that would outlet onto his property. But soon after that was presented and they evaluated further on their end, it was deemed, infeasible for them to take that pipe and carry it further onto their property. So since then, we've been going back and forth. I'd probably say, 2 or 3 different variations on the theme to try to get a consensus on where to put the stormwater. It's noted that the existing runoff now does sheet flow onto the property, and that is, from Route 9, at least 800, 900 feet, down to the West Old Post Road. That's an existing stormwater pattern. We're not really altering it, but what we're trying to do is collect the stormwater from the 10-foot widening that we have, which is about 200 feet long, to accommodate the request to take care of the stormwater runoff. So our latest version of that is to install a dry well type structure with an overflow pipe on it in the case that a certain amount of the water doesn't get infiltrated into the stone and into the ground. The overflow pipe will act as sort of an outlet, but it won't be the full amount of stormwater runoff onto the roadside. And all that work will be within the acquisition. None of the work proposed right now will be on the adjoining property. It'll all be within the acquisition.
Thanks, Chris. And just a matter of clarification, whether it's 10 or 15 feet wide, it's still the same square feet, which is 3,380 from the appraisal, right? Is that, am I correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
the map that I think is Exhibit 1, that has a correct offset, which I think is about 15 feet.
Okay.
But what we did was, I think the original acquisition was for, or the appraisal was for 3,308 square feet. The changes that we made by adding the asphalt kick-up gutter, which is another request from the property owner, we kept the acquisition the same, based on the roadside fill slopes, to keep that square footage the same.
Okay,
So that
got it.
didn't go up. We're able to move around the fee take lines to keep that acquisition the same.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, any questions for Chris at this point? Okay. Let's see, Steve. I'm going to go through some of the findings before that's proposed in the resolution at the end of the public hearing before the board votes on it. But before that, is there anything we need to do?
Yeah, I just wanted to address that Jennifer Holmes, the town clerk, has provided to me proof of publishing of the notice of the hearing, that it was run consecutively for five days, and also served upon the property owner and the property attorneys, property owner and the attorney for the property owner by registered mail return receipt, and all of that is in file.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Kevin, is there anything we need to add to that before we take public comment? Okay, thank you. All right, let's open this up for public comment. Would anyone like to address the board on this eminent domain proceeding? Yeah, Roger.
I got a question on the drainage. I talked to Chris this afternoon.
Speak to the mic.
Can you go up to the mic, Roger? Would you mind?
Yep. I talked to Chris this afternoon. It's the first I knew about a dry well up there, and that's clay ground. It absorbs pretty much nothing. So the dry well would just be a holding spot. And the overflow would go back onto the person's property or down along the ditch. We already have problems with dry wells in Luther's Forest. I'm not out for this dry wells theory. So, I'm not on board with this dry well drainage thing that's going on here. It's gonna be a maintenance problem for the town, and when it starts coming out of the dry well, then the homeowner's gonna ask, well, you're still draining stuff on my property. And so the town's opened themselves to possibly a lawsuit. So I talked to him, I told him that I disagree with the dry well theory, and you should pipe it or open ditch it or whatever down through there. The dry well's not gonna work because it's clay. It absorbs nothing.
Okay, thanks, Roger.
Yep.
Chris, did you address that? I mean, from an engineering perspective, is the dry well with the added stone gonna work?
Yeah, I mean, we use, some tests in the area to kind of back it up, but yeah, we're gonna have to add some more stone to it just to ensure that the dry well will infiltrate a little bit. We probably wouldn't recommend it if it was more volume, but we're getting such a little amount of stormwater runoff. That one dry well, oversized dry well, should take a good chunk of the runoff. And we are filling in a little bit of the road, which will help too. We're not gonna put the dry well in the existing ground now. Our road is gonna be up at least 2 to 3 feet, so we'll have 3 feet of good fill around the dry well to begin with. And yeah, we plan on making, adding at least, 3 to 4 feet of stone around the dry well to get some better soil in around it. But yeah, we checked some data nearby. The soils are similar to, across the street and, kitty corner to the site. It's not the best for dry wells, but it'll infiltrate some of the water. But that's what the overflow is, because if you get a big storm event, it might not take it. We don't want the water to flow up onto the road. So the overflow pipe will maybe like a 4 or 6 inch pipe. But yeah, it's gonna flow out on the roadside, but then that will divert down into the property. So maybe an option under that with the overflow pipe is to do a small ditch just to kind of maintain the water before it runs down onto his site. Because we know that is an issue. He doesn't want any type of water.
So we have,
on his
just
property.
so I can wrap my simple mind around this, we have existing rights to sheet water onto that landowner's property as is from the current road configuration. What we're talking about is the existing accumulation of water that will result from the additional pavement we're putting in there, which is a fairly modest stretch of pavement. But our obligation, we don't have rights to just let that water flow onto his land from that additional impermeable surface, right? That's it.
Yeah, from the road work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a gray area as far as the New York State highway law, and as far as drainage. The bigger thing is, private property running onto, town or state highways is almost forbidden. But the other way, I mean, the town road has been there for years, and the water has been sheet flowing off on his property, already. It's an existing condition, and we're not making it that much worse by adding 200 feet times 10 feet width of roadway.
We are adding a little bit of extra sheet drainage onto his property, right?
Correct, yep.
So the alternative would seem to be, we would have to acquire easement rights to sheet that additional water or direct that additional water onto his land, right, somehow.
Right, you almost have to chase that easement further back to take care of it.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Would anyone else like to be heard in the public hearing on this matter? Jamie, tell me if there's, all right, no hands raised? Okay, then what we'll do is when we reach this matter on an action item, I'll recite the propositions that the proposed resolution makes, the findings that it makes before we get to that. Okay, so we're ready to start our agenda tonight, and if everyone would rise for a salute to the flag and a silent prayer, I'd appreciate it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And unless Craig is willing to admit how old he's going to be on Thursday, we'll probably proceed to the next presentation. Happy birthday.
We'll just proceed. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to talk about the Luther Forest Athletic Fields, the schematic design.
Skip the minutes.
No, I'm sorry. We have to skip the minutes because we're not ready to approve the minutes, last minutes. So we'll move to the next item.
All right, good evening. My name's Tim Larson. I'm a associate principal with the LA Group. We've been fortunate to have been working at the Luther Forest Athletic Fields for probably about 10 years now. This is our third project at the facility. So I just have a very brief presentation tonight. We're in the schematic design phase. So we submitted our schematic design package to the town, and we felt like this was a good idea just to bring the town board up to speed as far as some of the initial thinking as far as scope and obviously cost. Bear with me if you guys want to talk about dry wells more.
Last year, I learned what the difference between a dry well and a catch basin is from Roger. Not sure I remember.
All right, so first off, project scope. So we've broken it down into two primary categories. The first being the recreational and site lighting. So a part of that we have included in the scope. And when I go over the scope, that's not necessarily what's in the final project. These were project components that we were asked to at least preliminarily design, engineer, come up with a cost. And now we're at the point where we need to make some selections as far as what's in the town budget as far as what you've originally asked for. So that's just one clarification. So this first breakdown is primarily all of the electrical and lighting components. So we have recreational field lighting for softball field 1. We have lighting of the primary soccer field, and I'm going to show you quickly on a map where this all is in relation to the site when I get through this. Parking facility and access drive lighting, and pedestrian circulation lighting, and we have 4 scoreboards going in, 3 for the softball and 1 for the soccer field is included in our design scope. What we're calling the general site improvement scopes includes paving the existing gravel parking lot, looking at an expansion of that current gravel parking lot to add more parking capacity, bleachers for each softball field, a softball protection netting system that would essentially encapsulate just beyond the dugout of each of the 4 softball fields, playground system, and a pre-engineered covered shelter for the soccer facility. So looking at all this on a map, so just to orient you, I think everybody's fairly familiar with the site, but we have the existing parking facility, our entrance drive here. We have our primary concession building here, the secondary here, and then obviously the softball complex and the middle terrace soccer field, and then the upper terrace. So just for context. So looking at the electrical improvements. So this is softball field 1, so this would be lit. And then this is what we're referring to the soccer complex. So the whole middle terrace of the soccer complex would be lit. These orange dots here are parking lot and access drive lighting. And we have the four scoreboards. So there's 1 existing scoreboard located here at softball field 1. We'd replicate that for each of the remaining 3 softball fields. And then we'd add an additional 1 at the soccer complex. So as far as ancillary lighting, so once you leave your car and it is night and you're leaving your car and going to either the softball or the soccer complex, there would have to be some level of pedestrian lighting to safely allow somebody from a vehicle to get to their point of destination. And speaking with Kevin and Alyssa during some of the preliminary designs, moving forward in terms of value engineering and how can we get the most out of the funding, we would look to utilize some kind of secondary lighting off of the sports field lighting, so there'd be a lower tiered, say, floodlight that would help light some of the secondary areas. That's not gonna light everywhere that's dark, but I think it's gonna help as far as looking at costs and trying to get things to be a little more manageable. So this is not a simulation of the site, but this is just showing some of the technology as far as LED, downward casting, sports field lighting. And we just recently installed the same lighting for 2 rec fields in the city of Saratoga Springs, 1 at the west side rec park and 1 at the east side rec park. So again, this is the quality of the light that and the system that would be specified. As far as parking lot fixtures, we probably look to emulate what's used in the Luther Forest campus, just very contemporary, utilitarian, nothing over the top as far as cost or aesthetics, just keep it simple. And then looking at the secondary programmatic elements. So paving the entire parking area, and then this is showing an expansion of the parking area, pushing it right adjacent to the existing septic leach field that's located here. So this adds about 40 parking stalls here, brings our parking count to around 170. We have the bleacher system, so each field would get 2 bleachers for home and away. So that's a total of 8 for each of the fields. This red line emulates the net protection system. So each field will get a net protection system that would extend approximately 40 feet in the air to help with any foul balls that could stray from the field. Right now, we're showing the existing playground structure at the far end of the facility, and there's really not a great spot for the playground under the current footprint, just given, we're basically maxed out the whole site as far as recreation use. So this location here pulls us further away from any potential foul or stray balls from the softball field. But then again, proximity-wise, you know, we're all the way across the field. So-
Is that worth doing, really?
Exactly, and we have not met with the soccer club or with Miss Scotty's. One potential relocation, and I don't know how much they use this middle tier soccer complex, because it is rather large. Right now, we're showing fitting one half size and one full regulation size soccer field. If you were to shift this field up, you could locate the playground down the slope where this existing walkway kind of ends. That could be a location for it, but again, you're taking away from your recreation field by doing that. But that would give you a centralized location for the playground.
The programmatic idea behind the playground is that you've got families with younger kids there that you want to keep occupied. Is that why we'd be
Exactly,
doing
or
that?
Miss Scotty's has a tournament that day and it's families and they're trying to kill time between games. So that's the main intent of it. I don't think it's a destination where somebody's gonna get in their car and drive here to go to this playground, though they could. But
How
from my understanding, that's-
how committed to that are we?
it's a good question.
We're not.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We're not
Okay.
really committed to anything yet, I don't
From
think.
from my perspective of all the elements we're adding here, that seems to be the most secondary and not directly related to the recreation program of the site.
Seems like it's a nice to, right?
Exactly. And the pre-engineered covered shelter, again, there's not a lot of great area to locate that. From my understanding, it's the soccer club that has requested that. So there is a flat area adjacent to the soccer complex on the far end of the field where we could locate that.
How bad is that slope behind center field on field 2? Is that a significant grade behind, no, dead
Which
center
is
field?
two? This is field 2?
No, the other one.
This one?
Yep, yeah,
Yeah, so this is where the stormwater management system is.
okay, all right.
So it's
That's
pretty
not
steep
good,
slope.
yeah, that's,
Unusable.
The pre-engineered structure would be for storage or for players?
No,
It's
it's
a
open
pavilion.
air, from what I understand, they just want a covered shelter. Beyond that, I'm not sure the.
Okay,
it looks like it's a
overall-
pavilion, right?
It is.
okay.
So again, I'm just gonna flip through just some visuals. So protection netting system is exactly what you would think. It's a netting, black netting that would extend 30 to 40 feet above ground, anchored by posts, bleacher systems, I'm sure everybody's familiar with. That's the idea behind the open air covered shelter, similar to the Malta Community Park pavilions. Playground structure, you know, I think whatever we decide, and just keeping costs in consideration, is probably something more on the left, which is your basic playground, but we could look to try to add some kind of uniqueness to the playground if funds were there to add a little bit of that, but not go over the top with that. But there is little touches that we could add just to kind of, you know, add to the setting of.
Well, they've got to be rocket themed, right?
Pardon me?
I mean, they've got to be rocket themed,
It could be, yeah.
if we could.
So as far as cost, so again, all of what I've just listed is not necessarily in the project. I think that's gonna come beyond this meeting here. But when you look at the overall costs and add everything up, you know, we're looking at almost 2.5 million. So that includes all the electrical improvements, all the site programmatic improvements. If we were just to pull out what the scope elements are in the SAM grant through DASNY, those costs come out to just around $650,000. So that includes the new 3-phase electrical service that we're gonna need to do any improvement here. It includes the lighting for softball field 1, the scoreboards for fields 2, 3, and 4, and the bleachers for each field.
Tim, I have a question for
Yes,
you.
sir.
In terms of the electrical needs, Has any thought been given to the possibility of utilizing solar for at least the lighting, which would help offset quite a bit of the cost?
Yep, so for recreation field lighting, solar isn't really a possibility just because of the demand for it. Some of the pedestrian lighting, we could look at potentially a solar powered. If we were to do solar power, it would probably be a light fixture that would have the panel attached to it. One thing to consider with that is if it's located adjacent to the softball field, it could be damaged by foul balls. So that's just something that, we'd have to look at.
So when you say demand, you mean that
Electrical demand,
it'd be too much?
for sure, yes.
Now, with the lighting, are we relying on this lighting to operate all night long, or is it just during the time we would expect folks to be getting to and from safely?
Right, it would be only per event. So it would be, if you have a 3-hour game, the lights would be on for 3 hours. Likewise for the parking facility lighting and the pedestrian lighting, I'd assume if there's nothing going on from a recreation field standpoint at night, you don't really need to have the park open and the parking lot lit at that point.
Tim, the three-phase service, what are you considering in there? Is that bringing it from the new line that's in there?
Yep, so
Or-
we've coordinated with NICEAG. So we actually have an approved design through NICEAG to tie in across the road from Rocket Way
Okay,
and bring power basically right to the existing maintenance cut through,
okay,
So
so
we
that's
have an
to that
approved-
new line.
that new line. So they're
Okay.
gonna extend that across the road, come up Rocket Way about 100 feet, and then from there we'll go underground into the site.
Got it.
And so we've requested that service to be upgraded enough that if you were to light all 4 fields and the soccer complex, that new service coming in could handle that. If, say, in 10 years you wanted to light the whole facility.
And I think to the solar component, we could probably do scoreboards, the solar.
Yeah.
The one scoreboard that's currently there is solar.
Yep.
The only problem with it being is it got hit with a softball,
Perfect.
which tends to happen when they're on a softball field.
From my perspective, powering those secondary elements, that's not a big draw. So, I mean,
Right.
if it were me, I'd hardwire
Yeah.
that aspect of it for sure.
No, some of the conversations I'd had with the soccer club is they had indicated an interest that they were doing some fundraising around some of these components already.
Okay.
Do we know, I'm assuming, it sounded like we haven't talked with either of the clubs yet about what, sort of
We
what
have
they
not.
prioritize and where they want to come in with funds,
I think as a
right?
first step, we wanted to come before the board, and then from here, we'll meet
Okay.
with the club and get their buy-in on a lot of the specifics here.
Yeah. Sorry. No, go ahead, Tim. 'Cause I know there were a couple things here that, I know like Miss Scotty's had talked about, they were seeking to do some fundraising for bleachers. And I think that the soccer club had been talking about trying to find some money for lighting themselves.
Okay.
So there may be some opportunities here that we're able to, maybe there are costs that can be offloaded onto the clubs that the town doesn't have to bear the cost as we look at what our priorities are.
What I was kind of thinking of is we light the field, and then we put just enough light on the parking facility so that people can get to their cars safely at the end of the game, and then hold off on the rest of it until funding allows for it. So that's a feasible kind of possibility, right?
Oh, for sure, and it's a good first phase because it gets people excited about the night use of
Yeah.
the facility, and I think once you start seeing that, they'll probably gain momentum, for the soccer club or for lighting the other softball fields, depending on how successful it is.
Yeah,
Sure.
I would agree with that thinking. The only addition I would throw in there, if there was a path forward on it, was if we can think about what the pricing is on the scoreboards for the additional softball fields. And the only reason I say that is I know that it's a requirement to get the state championship tournaments.
Okay.
That you have to have scoreboards on all 4 fields.
Okay.
I'm not sure what any of the requirements are on soccer.
Okay.
But I know that was one of the things that when we looked at the grant from the assembly, they were looking at both the lighting and the scoreboards for those reasons, as they saw the opportunity for the state tournament. So just to throw that out as a thought as we think about what we want to do here.
I'm afraid, as per usual, I'm, the least able to keep stuff straight and follow it. I mean, I'll need somebody to like segregate for me both as to scope and to price to marry up to the, the conversations that we're having.
Yeah.
I sense Darren in his mind has a kind of a scope and price in mind, but I'm not clear on what it is. So
Well, if we just take a step back, so the SAM grant, and if we look at what's the scope elements in that project.
right.
So again, that total cost right now in schematic design is $650,000. So
Right.
that includes lighting,
Yeah.
that includes the new three-phase service that you need regardless. Lighting softball field 1, the 3 scoreboards for the remaining softball fields, and the bleacher system for the softball fields. So that is what's in the current SAM grant.
Darren, you were talking about only sufficient lighting. So you would add to that then, Darren, in what you just described, sufficient lighting to light the parking lot?
That would be, one possibility for me, and the reason is we can't really use the field at night if we can't provide safe walking to the car,
Makes
if it's
sense.
really dark. So, if we could put the lights in and not do the parking lot, but then I think we'd have a hard time actually using the field at night when it's
Right.
really dark.
I'd be concerned about not making even more improvements to the parking. I mean, the parking lot as it is now is not in the best, the gravel parking lot. So, I'd be concerned about people being there at night and trying to walk to and from their cars on even with not the best lighting. When I look at your, your menu here, let's say, the parking facility and pedestrian lighting alone is $350,000. So if we were to add that, the pedestrian, and that's not improving the parking lot or expanding the parking lot, which is a whole nother. So we're up to the, whatever it was, 650 plus another 350. We're up to $1 million with just the basic.
Yeah, and Kevin had the same concern when we submitted the schematic. He saw the high cost of the secondary parking lot and pedestrian lights and asked us to just schematically look at if there's a way to utilize the recreation lighting poles as an element that could help light the parking lot and pedestrian areas. So I think we can do that to a certain extent. I think we get somewhat limited now if we're only looking at softball field 1, but there are ways where we can try to minimize and value engineer that cost. But what we proposed is meeting your current town code as far as lighting height, foot candle distribution, keeping light spill from the recreation field, focused on the field. So not to say we can't, massage that a little bit to help get costs down, but that's something Kevin asked us to look at.
I got a question on the solar option. Are you saying that the solar panels can't adequately supply the current for the overhead flood? Or is it that the area does not have adequate land for solar panels out there?
Yep. So, well, it's kind of both. So, I mean, for this project, obviously, this park is landlocked. We don't have a lot of available area where we would clear and put up solar in a solar array. And I think by the time you do that, your implementation costs are going to go up. Maybe long term, obviously, because of solar, your annual expenditure would go flat or go down. But there isn't available area to have solar panels. And then this type of lighting fixture for the recreation fields, just flip to this. It just needs too much power to have a singular solar panel on a light to have enough power to generate the foot candles we need for.
So what you're saying is the solar panels aren't adequately answers for everything across the board?
I think for the rec field lighting, what you're seeing on the screen, no. But I think it could be an option for the pedestrian or the parking lot. But then again, we just need to consider where they're located and are
Yep.
they gonna get damaged with
And,
the
and
volleyball.
you seem to indicate that that wasn't gonna save us that much money anyway, if we put up solar lights just for the parking and,
Well, you're spending a lot of money to bring three-phase power to
Right.
the facility.
Right.
We did look at what the cost would be to light each field. So to light the softball field for 3 hours, assuming a 3-hour game, it'd be $15 per game. To light the soccer field, which is a little bigger, assuming a 3-hour game, that would be $21 per game. And then lighting the parking lot at night, and this assumed an 8-hour duration, was $4.32 per night.
right, so we're not really saving that much.
I don't think so.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I don't, the tricky thing here is we all want to start, digging into the details, but I'd just soon see you finish your presentation, and then maybe that'll be a good point to recommence discussion about details and options.
Yeah, we're pretty much done.
Oh, there you go.
My last slide was just on schedule. So assuming we get some kind of direction in the next couple of weeks, we would need about 2 months for us to finalize our design. You assume 1 month to publicly bid, 1 month for signing contracts, getting front-end documents from a contractor. So best case scenario, we have a contractor on board in the early fall. But what that does is, so obviously our construction period at that point is minimal, but it allows us to get a contractor on board where we can get all the long lead item submittals for the recreation field poles, get the infrastructure in for the poles, could occur in the short term, and then come spring, we're ready to really hit the ground running and get everything installed. And so at that point, then you're looking at a 2 or 3 month project, depending on what's in the scope. So if we're only doing rec field lighting, this construction period starting in 2022, that's a couple months. If we're paving the parking lot, if we're expanding the parking lot, obviously then that starts to add a little more time in the construction schedule.
Is the extent of the parking lot as expanded, is that really adequate to support a major tournament event? It just seems like,
Good point.
No, they'll still
170.
be parking on Rockaway.
No.
yeah, if you're running a major event there and you might have recreation, soccer going on the same day, it looks
Right.
to me like it's pretty tight.
Yeah.
Is that a fair reaction?
No, I think it's fair. I mean, I have never been there during a tournament, but I've been obviously to other sports complexes where there are tournaments. Given again that we're so landlocked here, this parking expansion is only giving you 36 roughly spaces. So
That doesn't accommodate an average Tuesday night.
Okay.
So you're maxed out then pretty well, and there's no other developable real estate
No, I
there?
mean, we're all rec fields or the central parking area.
My recommendation would be, I mean, as much as I'd love to see the expanded parking, given the cost and the fact that it doesn't end up meeting, to John's point, doesn't actually end up meeting the need that we have there, I'd almost think that we drop that off. And, we want to pave, I think we want to pave the parking lot for safety and for, so that we're not having to constantly fill in potholes over there. But I think, the scope that we have here in the SAM grant, and if we have funds to pave the lot as well, and I would recommend peeling the bleacher system out and suggesting to Miss Scotty's they try to take that on, because I think that's something that they might be able to fundraise for. And I think they're targeting fundraising for it. That would just be my suggestion. And obviously the lighting for the parking lot as well, to Darren's point, so that we're safe.
What do we have for money, Kevin? I
Okay.
guess,
All right.
the idea of looking schematically at this really big scope was that, gosh, we might realize some economies of scale if we go beyond the DASNY grant, where if we're doing lighting in there anyways, maybe we can, save some money over time by lighting the soccer fields, right? So do we even have the money to, consider going beyond the DASNY grant?
All right, here, this project was first undertaken because of the DASNY grant that was coming forward, which was, there was a $250,000 grant. We submitted a preliminary grant application regarding that, which outlined these following components: bleachers, electronic scoreboards for the softball fields, softball field lighting for Field 1, and the engineering costs. We had put together a project estimate of about $375 with a $250 grant. The cost estimates that have now been prepared are exceeding those estimates, okay? Which is,
That's the 648 we're talking now?
yes.
That's
Yeah.
apples to apples.
Yeah.
So it went from 375 to
But that's not,
648.
just to clarify, that's not necessarily apples to apples, because when we were asked to put that order of magnitude cost together, we did not include any of the three-phase service upgrade, because at the time, we had no idea how much that would be.
The
So that-
three-phase
that's-
service.
That's the biggest
Yeah.
differential.
Yeah.
Right. So to continue though, to answer John's question, we have a SAM grant at $250. We also started the conversation knowing that we had Luther Forest Technology Campus mitigation recreation fees of approximately $954,000 that could be expended. If you just take those two pots of money, you got $1.2 million. If you look at the bleachers, the protective netting, which for a long time I've heard coming out of Miss Scotty's as this is a need. We
Yeah.
need to have protective netting there. We want to light the softball for Field 1, and we also have to light the parking lot to make sure people get from the parking lot to the softball Field 1 safely. You're coming in at roughly $1,170,000. So you're right in that target with just those categories of what money that you have before you, if you decide to go into town fund balance, or there's also park reserve of another $590,000. But we have multiple parks,
Right.
so,
Right.
I'm
I don't know how
reluctant
much
to-
money you want to
Right.
throw to the project.
I
and,
agree, I'm
you know,
reluctant
so-
there as
The
well.
scope that you described does not do anything for the soccer stuff.
No.
Right.
No, it's providing the necessary
Through
power
three-phase
needs
service,
for
but
later on. And that's how we were approaching it in the beginning was, okay, Miss Scotty's got the grant per se, it was softball oriented. But what should we, when we're designing it, let's design it entirely to accommodate the soccer as well, so we know what those costs are, so that if there was additional funding opportunities that we could apply for, we have an estimate already in hand, and we could apply from there.
Well, and just so I understand, Tim, if there was an opportunity in the future to light the softball fields, what's being done with the three-phase service would mean you wouldn't have to spend those resources again, right? You would be able to hook into that power?
Exactly. You will now have enough power to light every single field
Okay.
at the facility.
So at least we've got an outlet to plug into.
Exactly.
Right, okay. Maybe what we do here is recalibrate with the two clubs as well and kind of see, are their priorities still their priorities? We've talked about some of our priorities and hear what their priorities are, recognizing that we have some limits on our resources and that, we have a grant that we told the state we were gonna do certain things with. And that we don't have unlimited resources here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel a little, I think, it's like choosing between your children, even though I only have one, but, I mean, to leave the soccer folks with nothing doesn't feel right to me. I mean, I think we ought to consider doing something, if it's the, the pavilion facility or something, just to, show that we're, willing to support their programmatic needs as well. I'm kind of you gotta put it on paper for me and, reorganize the scope and numbers so that I can see. I mean, we're talking about now putting what, $900,000 more in the scope you just described. That what started with a $250,000 grant from DASNY would now be a $1.2 million overall project.
Well, I think when we started this, we were going towards, you know, that the Luther Forest mitigation fees were there. They were for that purpose. We got an opinion from council. We could utilize that recreation money in here. It seemed to be a logical place, and that's where we got the I thought we got the direction from the town board to say,
No,
okay,
no
this-
question you did, but
Okay.
really what the catalyst for this was, we're getting money to light the softball fields.
Yep.
Now we're at $1.2 million. Okay. I mean, I like the notion of, I realize that time is a consideration, but the notion of having the, you know, the rec groups come in and talk to the whole town board a little bit, if we can arrange it, you know, about their views on it, that would help me.
If I may suggest, just given that we're looking at timing and the schedule that Tim suggested is, I think Alyssa, you know, interacts with these groups on a regular basis. If maybe we could ask her to have those conversations and vet this discussion with them and maybe have come back with those recommendations so that we're not, you know, come back in our next meeting with those recommendations, or maybe even via email so that we don't push this out any further, where Tim's asking for a pretty aggressive time frame here to get this bid out this summer, and as we know, construction gets pricier by the second.
I mean, it's up to the town board. I would just soon have the rec groups come in so we can all hear them. You know, I think we have different questions and different thoughts about priorities, and I'd like to, you know, have the interaction directly with those folks.
Maybe we should have that as a workshop rather than a part of a regular town board meeting, or a workshop before the
Certainly
town
fine
board
with that,
meeting,
yeah.
so that
I agree with that
Yeah,
too.
certainly fine with that.
if, you know.
Get their
of course they're-
priorities and then iron them out financially.
And we have not shared this information yet with those groups, okay? We felt that the first stop was with the town board.
I think timing wise, this time of year, that's gonna be a very difficult thing to pull off as everybody's at the end of the school year.
The other thing,
let's be
Kevin, just to go
cognizant of
back on the money, you were talking about the protective netting system. Did you have the bleachers in your, I mean,
Yes.
that's of everything, that's the smallest
Yeah.
amount. And then the lighting of the soccer field, the three-phase improvement, and the lighting of the pedestrian walkways in the parking lot. Was that,
Lighting of the softball, not soccer.
softball, sorry. And that came up to what? I started to try to add it myself, but,
$1,168,000.
and so, I guess part of my concern about that is,
I had a electronic scoreboard in
Okay.
there for the primary soccer field,
okay,
so I did it, you know.
so we're throwing them that bone.
Yeah.
So all of that comes up to, 1.1, we got what, 1.2? My
Yeah.
concern would be, once we gotta build it, it's
Yeah.
it's probably realistically gonna cost more than,
Especially now.
We also envisioned it would be separate contracts as well, because we were thinking that the electrical
would be,
contract would be one contract. The contractor's primarily responsible for field lighting.
Right.
That would be a contract.
Yeah, I mean, depending on once we figure out what the scope is, then we would figure out the most cost-effective way to get the best price back from the contractor. But at this point, if we have a significant electrical scope, it would make sense to have a separate electrical contract and then a general contract.
my other concern with all of this, I'm okay with making improvements. I think it's a facility that we should make improvements to. I don't wanna make improvements to the detriment of our other parks, which, also we have some things. But my other concern about it is, these are managed by Miss Scotty's, by the Malta Athletic Association, and I want to be sure that it actually ends up being available then to outside groups, that it's not just Miss Scotty's, or, that if the LA group wants to have a softball team play on our fields at night, that it would be available to other outside groups and not just,
Well, the
There it
way
is.
the Malta Athletic Association works is you have to rent the fields from them.
Right.
It's not just open. You
right,
can't
I
just.
understand.
Because
But-
that was a problem during the pandemic.
Right.
People were just
Right.
using them without
Right.
those contracts.
But I guess my thing is I want to make sure that they also are willing to rent to outside groups and not just keep it on their own, you know. So I know we don't really have much oversight over the MAA. I mean, we could have more oversight than we do with the MAA. And, like I said, that's my biggest concern, is that if we're going to invest over $1 million into these fields, they need to be available for outside groups to be able to use them also.
I agree with that, too. We shouldn't be
Fair enough.
focused
We'll
on
put
one
together
group.
some options in terms of the money available, where the money goes. Alyssa can get that information out to the groups, and we'll see if they can digest that and meet with the board some way, somehow before our next board meeting, so we can try to get this on track quickly if possible. We will do that. Does that sound good?
Thank you.
Okay. All righty. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tim.
Appreciate it. Nice job. Okay, does anyone on the town board have any announcements or comments they'd like to make?
I actually have one. At the last meeting, I was remiss, and I meant to thank my colleagues on the town board that attended the Malta Sunrise Rotary meeting, where we hosted Congressman Paul Tonko as our speaker. Thank you all for joining us. I thought it was a good meeting. We had a lot of, different people. When I spoke with him yesterday, he was very appreciative of the fact that most of the town board had attended, and so thank you. And we meet every Thursday at 7:15. We're meeting in Shenandoah Park, and now we're even circulating, providing breakfast, so you can get free eats.
Free, you said?
Free. We're in the
That hasn't
park,
happened in a
7:15. It's kind of nice. The birds are the background music. The only other thing is, of course, yesterday we dedicated the Veterans Memorial Park to Captain David Wallingford. It was a blistering hot day, and like everything, it was a lot of work. A lot of work, of course, on Renee's part, but a lot of volunteers. Including a lot of tradesmen, did a lot of work. The place looked beautiful. There was lots of people there. I can't even guess how many. The Boston Spa Community Band played, which that was a nice touch, I thought. And it was a great day, and thanks to all our vets, and go over and ooh and ah about the beautiful entranceway now, because it's great. And Dave did great. He was there the whole time. Actually spoke, which was great too. So it was good to see him. I think he was moved, but you know how he is. He's humble. So.
And I want to thank everybody that showed up Sunday. It was a marvelous event. It was awful hot. They had a great turnout, and I will say that park is quite the highlight. I never, ever thought it would end up to be so beautiful there. It's intricate, the iron out in front. Those guys did a magnificent job. And the other thing I found out is the iron in the front came from the old cemetery fence, and they did a wonderful job. It looks like it's brand new, powder coated and everything. Did an awesome job. Thank you, everybody.
I wish Ozzy Blow was around to see it.
Oh,
Yeah, after all
he
that.
was smiling though.
Hey, Darren, I'd just like to echo, the one thing, everything that was said, it's certainly apt and true, but the one thing, I've known Dave, not close, but, known him since I've been in town government. And the thing that really struck me was what a remarkable, I heard things about Dave I had never heard before, and I knew he was a special person, but I didn't realize the extent of it. And the thing that struck me was that here you have a guy, who after, almost giving his life for his country, and enduring the pain of, wounds in battle and recovery and such, he didn't he didn't stop. Not only did he raise his hand and go back into the battle and keep fighting, in the course of history, you would have, you would see in some societies where if you ever did that, when you were done, they would give you a land and title, and you would never have to do anything more for the rest of your life. That's how some societies, treat war heroes like that. But Dave, had nothing like that. When he was done and gave what he gave, he didn't expect anything, and he came back. And when they were looking for volunteers again, Dave raised his hand. And when they were looking for him again, he raised his hand. He always, said, "Here I am. I have this time and ability, and I'm gonna give it to others." And really, just a remarkable life that he's led in service of others. And as Cynthia said, not a smidge of any kind of expectation of acknowledgement or reward or anything. He just kept doing it, and he never, he would never run out to the front and look to be acknowledged. He was always there, just doing it to make things happen, and never expecting anything in return. Really, the model of what public service is, and as I said to him, real inspiration to me and many other people. So Dave Wallingford, the mold might have been broken when he was born. Just a remarkable
I gotta
person.
say something about him though also. When he and I and Renee co-founded that group, he'd stop over, we'd talk about their finances and everything, and he did. He worked awful hard. He was on the planning committee, he worked in town on the museum, in the colleges and everything, and he'd always say to me, "Well, Craig, what's going on in Malta?" he'd say, every single time he'd step in the house. Well, I knew darn well Dave knew more about what was going on in town than I did. I always got a chuckle out of him, and he's still working. He's still working, looking at the finances and going through it and approving things, and he's something. He's a hero.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
I think I should, just one question. John, when we were laying sod the other day in preparation, does it make you feel bad that your young son, Christian, seemed to be outworking you at quite the pace? I couldn't help but notice that.
Roll
Did
for
he break
roll.
a sweat?
Roll for roll. He did try and carry a full roll aside. I give him credit for that, but he couldn't quite make it all the way. So
Is he going to pursue a career now in turf management because of that?
I'll be happy if he pushes a lawnmower at the house.
Yeah, it's a terrific job by all concerned, a ton of work. Roseanne and I have been remarking on how wonderful the park looks, so thank you, everyone. Terrific job. Just one quick notice, the rubbish drop-off day was conducted last Saturday, and we'll have the second one this Saturday on June 12th. Please remember that we can't take items with refrigerant freon in them, like refrigerators, freezers, air conditionings. Excuse me, we can't take televisions. We felt bad because people came up with televisions having waited in line, and we just couldn't take them. So other than that, we look forward to seeing you. Any other comments? Department heads, any comments by department heads? Town residents, any comments by town residents? Kathy Eitzman has her hand up. Kathy. Kathy, you're muted or something.
There. Now I think you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Great event today. Cynthia came. We had 80 seniors, 88 total, enjoying a luncheon, and it was wonderful. We had our own members put together a band, acoustic players gang, and they did wonderful. So seniors are doing well. Different hat on the flashing pedestrian crossing on Round Lake Road. I know that was ordered. It didn't get put in yet. I was wondering where we are with that. The weeds are quite tall there. So there was a child on a bicycle. You couldn't see him at that intersection when he entered. And also short people. You can't see them because the weeds are so tall at that intersection where that light should be. So I have a concern with that. One
That-
other thing,
That roundabout is our responsibility, right? Does our maintenance take care of
not
those
the
potholes?
roundabout. This is right at the crossing at the Trustco Bank, I think it is, the bank and the Hannaford Plaza. It's the crossing in the middle between the roundabouts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that one got mowed down, I think, by the county and was ordered. And I saw people out there. I was very hopeful it was being installed, but it didn't get installed. And then on another senior note, we are looking for people that can help our seniors move some of those items out of their homes to bring them to bulk pickup. Thought I had something lined up, but it did not work. But I have a couple seniors that could use some help. So if anybody is available on Saturday, please contact me.
Kathy, I'll check with the Rotarians on Thursday. If you can send me something specific, I don't know if anybody will be available Saturday, but
Will do. Will do. I'd be glad to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Any other comments? Ted?
Question I have is in regards to the ball fields. If you're considering developing to full build-out eventually, and at the present time, on a particular event that takes place, there's a question of ample parking. Most building designs and developers, things are occupancy of a structure is based on the number of parking spaces you have. In this particular case, there is not ample enough parking. So would you be suggesting that there be parking on Rocket Way or for this event? That's if I understand it correctly. That's one thing that I may have misunderstood, but I don't think so. I'm kind of curious.
The way I looked at it is, we might not be able to have parking for all events on all fields to be simultaneously conducted. I mean, I don't think we're going to have room for that. But they often don't happen at the same time. So, you could light all the fields, but they're not all necessarily going to be going. They can be. I mean, I guess, there's also an option for a town board in the future to talk about using that small soccer field as you move in to the right for additional parking, if it comes to that. So there are 2 or 3 other soccer fields there. So, I mean, I think there are possibilities, even if the parking lot, in the ideal world could be bigger.
If you're referring to the state tournament, what's typically done is there's no on-site parking. They're bussed in from off-sites. They're parking on off-sites, and then their shuttle buses run back and forth because where that's currently done at the Moreau parks, there's not on-site parking for all the spectators that come in.
But when we have the groups come in, we ought to have Tim and talk more specifically about the issue so that we know what we're getting into. I mean, because if, as it is, forget about nighttime use, if as it is, you're jammed up with parking, to me that bears on where you should be spending your money. Do we need to make the parking expansion a priority?
Not to use a cliche from the movie, but if you build it, they will come.
Well, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. Anyone else? Yeah.
Tim Downey, Miller Road. Just a couple of questions about these athletic fields. It seems like clubs come up quite often, clubs. And where are these people coming from, the clubs? Are they all Malta residents?
Nope.
And who gets to pick who's gonna be on the club? And based on what I'm hearing, the club's gonna, you have to go through the club to, use the fields. So why are we even entertaining taxpayer money for clubs? And the other thing that sticks in my head, we're talking softball, and we're talking soccer. How about the people that want to play lacrosse? Yeah, how about the people that want to play baseball? I mean, it sounds kind of incredible to me, what we're trying to do. We're talking millions of dollars. To what? Basically, the clubs are gonna say, oh, I want lighting. Oh, they all want lighting. And I've been to state tournaments, softball. That facility is not for state softball. Is not. That's my opinion. But those are the questions I have about just listening to what's going on here. We're spending all kinds of money, millions of dollars, for basically 2 clubs. Does anybody answer that question with regards to who's gonna, in terms of who can play and who can't play? I had kids involved in clubs, and they came from all over the Capital District for one particular, for clubs, for soccer, softball, baseball. Has nothing really to do with taxpayer money.
Well, some of this is rec league. I mean, Alyssa's probably best suited to answer this. Some of this is rec league play, Tim.
Rec league does not play at night. Doesn't need lights.
Okay, well, if you're distinguishing on the basis of nighttime play, I guess I didn't understand.
Well,
that
that's where all the money is. The electric to bring in. I mean, it's incredible. And I had 3 kids that played sports. I mean, I can tell you, we lived down the wrong side of Round Lake Road. I was told by Clifton Park, oh,
Yeah,
you can't play. You know
Tim,
what I mean? So all this.
I want you to get information because as a taxpayer you're entitled to that, but I'm not sure that I would, reach those conclusions yet. Let's try and get you information.
Okay.
I know with Saratoga Wilton baseball, when my son played there once, and he's a lacrosse player, he played there once last year, they had some nighttime rec league play. So I just don't know the answers to your questions, and I want you to have those answers.
But we're talking clubs. These are all clubs.
Well,
These will not be all, and essentially, they're gonna pick who's gonna play. And do we have a problem with town of Boston kids coming over and playing?
no, because I think we have an agreement with the Malta Athletic Association, which, would be happy to provide you a copy of that addresses how they manage the, access to the fields.
Right.
The reason that's done that way is because if we didn't use them, we would have had to create the capacity in our own rec department to manage everything and maintain it. So using that nonprofit was really viewed as a better alternative at the time. But if you want more information,
Right, okay.
we'll do our best to
We
get it
don't
to
have all
you.
the information, but clubs usually have to pay for field time.
Yeah, for sure.
These
Yes.
folks we
Rental
talking, they're gonna
agreements, there's rental agreements between the clubs and the Malta Athletic Association. That's how the
pay? Okay,
structure
so
works.
it'll be sublet, they're gonna sublet that time to everybody
Oh,
else?
Alyssa, you can outline the agreements, right?
Yep, so Miss Scotty is a member of the Malta Athletic Association, so they can use the fields, but if an outside group an outside softball team wants to come in, there is a rental form that they submit to the Malta Athletic Association, and they pay the associated fee for whatever field they're renting. But Miss Scotty's kind of has first dibs on the field, and then whatever schedule is left.
But
But
they
the
pay
town
a
of Malta
fee.
has no consideration or who's gonna be on these clubs. I mean, it could be kids from Clifton Park, could be kids from Moreau, could be kids from, is that true?
Correct.
But we're talking about Malta taxpayers.
Well, I'll tell you what, Tim, from where I sit, I don't want to tell Alyssa that her job is now micromanaging private organizations and telling them how to run.
Right. but-
I wouldn't,
but
and
why are you giving
I wouldn't
the-
want that.
Why are you giving private organizations access to the fields then?
I didn't. The Malta Athletic Association was incorporated long
Or
before
the
I
high
came
schools,
here.
The high school,
but-
right? You've had high school tournaments?
Hang on, I'm trying to answer your question. The Malta Athletic Association was incorporated long before I came here. There's a contract in place, and these organizations rent the field time. The whole idea here is to have less government and less government operations and have a private organization do
I
the
agree-
work.
I agree with that.
So
but-
that,
but
so
the
that,
government's
so that we don't have
financing it all.
more government employees doing the work and running private organizations.
Right, so you're let the private organization run it, we're paying for it as a taxpayer.
Well, not the maintenance, Tim. I mean, that's the thing is these fees that are being charged go to offset maintenance expenses over there. The capital,
Right, but the capital,
yeah, no question, the capital cost is being paid for. And you know, I don't know what the numbers are, but the belief is that most of the use is by Malta, you know, residents. No question, some people from outside the area use those fields outside the town.
I'd like to see that data.
And if not for the Malta Athletic Association, for those fields, for the Ballston Spa Soccer Club, and for Miss Scotty's, I'm not sure where kids from Malta would be playing softball or soccer. I'm not sure they'd have those opportunities.
So I'm running the club, I've got fees, so if you wanna be on my club, you're gonna pay.
But Tim, we don't.
Just like any other service that you would access, just like using the community center and doing a class at the community center, you'd pay for.
Hey,
Right?
Timmy, I think you and I, when our youngsters were growing up, we brought them out to the field in Ballston Spa. We drove down a ruddy old road that had gravel in it, and you know what? They had a hell of a good time. Times have changed. Now, it was my understanding that when my daughter played at the high school, and it was Miss Scotty softball, that it was not a club. It was affiliated through the high school. Now, apparently I am wrong on that now.
It's a nonprofit organization. It's not affiliated with the high school.
It has nothing to do with the high school at
Not,
all.
to my knowledge, it never has been.
Where does Boston Spa High School?
You weren't
play
here
their
then,
games?
Tim.
Ballston Spa High School plays at the school.
But Tim,
Because
we
it
don't
was
form,
called
we don't form,
Scottish-
we don't form these organizations,
But you
or they,
finance 'em.
No?
okay, well,
No,
I mean,
we
I'm
don't.
trying to get,
We
Tim,
do. We're just talking.
These are developers' dollars that have gone into a mitigation fee that we're the stewards of. These are not tax dollars. These are mitigation fees that have gone in from developers that we're being asked to be the stewards of.
You're a.
And that we're being
elected
asked to spend
official.
based on the parameters
town
that
of
have
Malta.
been set forth.
You're an elected official from the town of Malta. Okay, so you can say what to do with the money?
Well, you can't say what you can do with recreation money. It has to be used for recreation. So that's the question here, Tim. It's not as if we could use that money and put up a new building or a new courthouse or something like that. It's used for recreation, and then decisions have to be made as to, you know, who you benefit.
Then it should be going to recreation to children of the town of Malta.
It
and
is.
The town of Malta, period.
Well, okay.
Not going through a
That's
club.
Well, that's a fair.
All on clubs.
that-
And I had to pay.
Well, then let's tell the community center we
Excuse me
can't have
for a
kids from
minute.
Okay,
outside.
I think, all right, I'm going to call, we've had enough. Thank you very much, Tim. We have your point. Appreciate it. Any other comments by town residents? Yeah.
I know we're getting long into the evening, so I won't be as verbose as I planned. Just kidding. Anyway, I wanted to thank you guys for the garbage days. It was a great success for myself and everybody that was there that was actually running the process. It was extremely efficient, and I was just amazed at how quickly they were able to get those cars through. So that was amazing. On that, I saw that there's a big pile of bikes out there. What is the plan for that?
They're sold to a metal recycler, I think, and we brought in some money from the metal that was all segregated. So I forget how much it
Actually,
was,
that's-
but wait, no, the bicycles aren't recycled.
No.
Oh,
Awesome. Even better.
well,
Yeah.
So they stay down in the metal bin and they're
Yep.
gonna be repurposed.
I ride corrected.
And given away afterwards, understood, right?
And then on top of that, I don't know if you know, but I am a Marine veteran, and so seeing the Memorial Day celebration in Round Lake, and then yesterday's event right over there it was humbling to see the care and the dedication that Malta has for its veteran community, not just in Malta, but around Saratoga County and, you know, the greater nation and everything like that. It's great to see, you know, and I just wanted to thank you on the town board for being a part of that and getting that organized. And also great respect and thanks to Renee. I'm sure you all know, but I mean, she's running around with her, you know, like a chicken with her head cut off, getting all this done. And her primary focus on this is doing what's right for the veterans. I mean, on Saturday, over at the Homes for Heroes, she was there. Then she had to go do something at the park. Then she had to go show some homes. Then she had to come back. So just the dedication that she puts in. She's a real good resident of the town. So I wanted to, you know, say that thanks to her. And then just one comment on the rec leagues. I would just be cautious of, you know, I know it's a nice to do thing if we could have it, but at least have that in the back pocket of a playground for the kids. I mean, you think about it, you have two kids, one's playing a 10 o'clock game, one's playing an 11 o'clock game. What are we going to do with the kids that are still there? They, you know, maybe they can get home, maybe they can't, but it's just something I was thinking of. But other than that, thank you very much. That's all I got.
Thanks very much, Travis. Any other comments by town residents? Mike?
I just want to say that when we were to the holding hands part of the ceremony and the holding hands and singing, I had, you know, a group that I had hoped to hold hands with, which didn't seem interested. And I'm not saying it includes Jamie, and then I had Mike and Travis were my other options. So I migrated from that area.
That was probably because we were hot and sweaty and everything. Hello,
Well,
everyone.
I was holding Mrs. Crandall's hand, and I felt very privileged. But she won't even admit to it.
Hi, I'm Mike Williams from Malta off of Foxglove Way. First, I'd like to thank Roger and his crew. They did a great job paving the road on Eastline Road. I mean, road looks great. The guys were out there for all day long. I think about 12 hours at least, or maybe 14 hours a day they did. And then also Kathy Eisman, hopefully she'll invite me to the next senior luncheon. I'm at that age, I think.
Oh, you're in.
I'm in.
Dues is $15.
Okay.
Got another member, Kath.
But we've been talking a lot about the recreation funds and the money and everything. You know, I'd like the board to think about adult recreation. Okay, maybe even having like a, you know, 2.5 is a lot of money. I know you got state money, DASNY money, recreation money, but there's not a lot of adult recreation. Maybe like think a little bit bigger, but an amphitheater, something big, so we can have events at the park of some type. We can have naming rights for this theater, possibly. Just something bigger than, you know, my kids are older, so I don't have kids, don't have grandkids, not in the future yet. Even my wife would love some, but you know, I think the board should start thinking about adult recreation. So, what are your thoughts?
Do you play hockey, Mike?
Do we have a hockey facility here? I used to play street hockey in Utica, yes.
You know, we've talked about that, Mike, and thanks for bringing it up. It's an interesting point. You know, Roseanne and I have talked about this, you know, several occasions in terms of some sort of a shell or something like that, you know, maybe we could incorporate some places where we could have, you know, entertainment on summer nights, you know, rather than just at the town park. So we certainly have discussed it. You know, the cost factor is a big one there.
Sure.
But,
oh, yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Like I said, with naming rights, with fees, with possible concerts,
Yeah.
where participant, or they're getting paid, but people are paying for those for the concert and things like that.
And one of the previously untapped resources that could be brought to fruition with the lighted field at Luther Forest is adult softball leagues that are
Right.
currently not using those fields, so
Okay.
that's another resource as well.
Hey, Kevin.
Thanks, Mike.
I have a question on maintaining the parks afterwards. Can we use the mitigation fees for, say, asphalting afterwards or fixing and upgrading the places afterwards? Does that come from the same funding source? Can it be?
Generally does not, it usually comes out of our general operating budget because it's an operating type of expenditure. The mitigation fees were to offset additional
Construction.
recreational needs of the community because you're expanding your community base.
You-
To provide for additional recreational opportunities, similar with the park reserve, you know, the state has always said through park reserve, it's money that you're accumulating from residential developers.
Okay.
Is to provide for additional park opportunities or for major rehabs, you know, not just minor repairs and maintenance.
For example, the Dunning Street Park, when that was, I shouldn't say upgraded, but taken care of, that comes from a separate fund, true?
That came out of the park reserve, from my recollection, the majority of that money came out of the park reserve because it was that park was over 20-plus years old, so
Yep.
it was a major renovation to the park.
And it was costly.
Yeah.
Yep, okay, thank you.
Hey, Darren, just one more quick thing. I want to thank, while Scott's here, the Malta ambulance for having a crew standing by yesterday, because there were a lot of older people there, and it was a very hot day. Fortunately, we didn't need them.
Good point. Ann, I see you have your hand up. Ann Klotz.
I'm trying to, okay. My question would be, when you bring the groups in to talk about their different use of the field, the different leagues, maybe we could get a sense of how many children are involved in each of the different leagues and the number of hours they would use the field, so we can get a sense of, you know, cost per hour per person of the upgrade. That's all.
Fair point. Thanks, Ann. Anyone else? Nobody has their hands up, right? I can't see any. Okay, thanks very much. We'll move on to our next item, and that is for business for tonight. Okay, so we have several items on the agenda. The first one is the ambulance district, and preliminary to making a motion on that, I have three things to go over. First of all, I want to note that this, a resolution establishing a district is subject to a permissive referendum under the town law. But this resolution that's proposed before the board tonight would provide for a referendum by all the electors on election day, notwithstanding the fact that a referendum is permitted by petition. So this would be automatic, and the board has discussed this before, and I think there's a feeling on the board that it's an important issue, and it's important for all the electors in the town of Malta to have a voice and really decide that issue. So this resolution proposes to put that on the election on this coming election day on November 2nd. The second item is to just go over the short form environmental assessment. This doesn't really change anything in terms of how roads are going to be used, how land is going to be used, et cetera, et cetera. But just in an excess of caution, we should go over the part 2 of the EAF. The first one, does it create any material conflict in land use or zoning? I think the answer is no.
I agree.
Will the proposed action result in a change in the use or intensity of land? I think the answer is no.
Agreed.
Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of an existing community? I think the answer is no.
Agree.
Agreed.
Will the proposed action have an impact on environmental characteristics that cause the establishment of a critical environmental area? And I think the answer is no.
Agree.
Agreed.
Will the proposed action result in adverse change in the existing level of traffic or affect existing infrastructure for mass transit, biking, or walkway? And I think the answer is no.
Agree.
Agreed.
Will the proposed action cause an increase in the use of energy and it fails to incorporate reasonably alternative energy conservation or renewable energy opportunities? Again, I think the answer is no.
Agree.
Agreed.
Will the proposed action impact existing public-private water supplies, public-private wastewater treatment facilities? And I think the answer is no on both.
Agree.
Agreed.
Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of important historic, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources? I think the answer is no.
Agree.
Will the proposed action result in adverse change to natural resources like wetlands, water bodies, groundwater, air quality, et cetera, et cetera? I think the answer is no.
Agree.
Agreed.
Will the proposed action result in an increase in the potential for erosion, flooding, or drainage problems? I think the answer is no.
Agree.
Will the proposed action create a hazard to environmental resources or human health? And I think the answer is no. In fact, it'll have a very positive impact if the ambulance district continues the fine work it's been doing. So I think the answer is no.
Agreed.
Okay, the third one is to go over the 4 items that are in the statute, these 4 items are in the proposed resolution for adoption, and they are, first of all, that notice of the public hearing was published and posted as required by law. The second, that all the property and property owners, as well as the residents of the town of Malta, will be benefited by it. The third is that all the property and property owners benefited by the proposed district are included within the boundaries of the district. And the last one is the establishment of the district as described in the map plan and report filed with the town clerk is in the public interest. So with those caveats initially, is there a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved?
Second.
Discussion.
Please, if I could.
Sure, John.
I think it's important to distinguish what this is and what it isn't. This is really to establish a way to tax to fund our ambulance. It doesn't determine how much funding will be provided for our ambulance service. That decision will continue to be made by the town board annually, or if there's a multi-year contract, from time to time. So to adopt this doesn't assure that the ambulance service will receive any particular level of funding. What it does do, if it's approved at referendum, is it provides for an ad valorem property tax to fund the ambulance contract that is agreed to by the town board instead of funding it from general town revenues. My own impression is, to be clear, I do not support the establishing a tax to fund the ambulance service. And I think one of the things that leads me to that conclusion is that when I look at how the town's finances have stood over the time that I've been on the town board, we've been able to fund, I think, a high-quality ambulance service without raising a property tax specifically dedicated to do so. And over time, we've actually increased the funding and also increased our fund balances in town government. So it looks to me like we have the room within our general revenues to continue to fund a quality ambulance service. And if we need to increase that funding, it looks to me like our general revenues can support reasonable increases in funding for the ambulance service. So I don't support the tax. I do support continuing to fund the the town ambulance contract at a responsible basis to maintain the quality that we have. And I voted in the past for increases in that contract. I also support the right of the people of the town, if they want to be taxed, to have the opportunity to do so. So I will vote for this resolution, but I'll do so Also stating that when I go to the polls, if this does go to referendum, I will be voting against the referendum because I do not want to see this tax put in place, even though I support the ambulance service and will support funding them, increase funding if necessary to maintain what we have. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Anyone else? Any other discussion? There being no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next item on the agenda is to adopt the revision to the code on High Point sidewalks, Chapter 139. Let's see. I just wanted to point out that the board, this resolution records that the board finds it's a Type 2 action pursuant to SECRA, and there's no necessity to comply with the State Environmental Quality Review Act. That being said, is there a motion to adopt this change to the ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The next item on the agenda is the amendment to the zoning law regarding the proposal for up on Route 9 and to make small changes to the use of the facilities. And there's a couple of items I'd like to add to that resolution to incorporate into a motion that may be made. The first is to the fourth whereas clause, just to record that the letter from the Saratoga County Planning Board dated May 24th, 2021, approved the notice, approved the change by the
Move the
town of Malta.
resolution with the amendment?
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. And the only item I'd add to the discussion is that this, the resolution provides that this is also a Type 2 action under SECRA and that therefore no further action is required. Any other discussion on this motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, the next one is the item that we had on our public hearing. And as I noted before, what I want to do is just recite the findings that this proposed resolution would incorporate and just to state them for the record.
Hey, Darren?
Yeah.
Before you do that, I'm not sure, and Jen, maybe you can, what do we do with the public hearing when, I don't think we formally closed it. Have we decided?
Oh, shoot.
Close it now.
I closed the public hearing at 7:36 p.m.
All right, I'm
I
sorry.
forgot.
just
No,
didn't-
I'm glad you reminded me, Steve. Thank you very much. Okay. The first, the public use benefit or purpose to be served by the proposed public project is to improve the intersection at Old Post Road and Route 9 by installing a right turn lane and making some other improvements to facilitate the improved traffic flow. The second is that the approximate location, per the engineer, has been described in the map and description that's attached to the resolution and to the other materials. I think it was submitted as an exhibit at the public hearing. The reasons for the selection is that the area land determined by the engineer is that necessary to complete the improvements. The general effect of the proposed project will not create a significant or adverse environmental impacts, and it's consistent with the townwide GEIS, which, as I mentioned, named this particular intersection as in need of improvement. The residents of Malta will benefit due to the improved traffic safety and traffic flow. The town board would incorporate resolution number 175 of 2020 regarding the absence of significant environmental impacts from the action. And the proposed action will not affect land uses, impact any local businesses, or negatively impact the aesthetics of the area or have significant negative effect on the environment. Copies of the determination findings will be forwarded to anybody who wants them without cost. So with those additions, I ask if there's a motion to adopt this resolution.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a change to the Creighton Manning Agreement to provide for a change out-of-scope work request that was created by certain delays in the Complete Streets project.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The next item is to approve the purchase of a vehicle for our building and planning department because the old one has reached its useful life.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The next item, and Steve and Kevin, tell me if we're all set to do this. I think we are, and that is to establish for retirement purposes the workday and reporting for some elected and appointed officials. We're all set with that one? Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The next item on the agenda, while we're very sorry that Glenn Rockwood had to submit his resignation from the Global Foundries Town of Malta Foundation, we're very happy that Judge Sloat has agreed to be appointed to that foundation in substitution for Glenn. This motion would appoint Judge Sloat as one of the directors of that foundation.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Congratulations and thanks very much, Judge. Appreciate that. The next item on the agenda is to make certain appointments to the Zoning Board of Appeals. This proposal would appoint Murray Eitzman, who's been an alternate, to a regular member of the board. And the second one is to appoint Gregory Gorton and Thomas Nicholson as alternates to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
So moved. Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, budget transfers. Kevin, I see we have some here. Is there anything you'd like to add before the town board asks some questions?
The only thing I would clarify for the town board before they would ask is the fact that the Old Post Road construction project has an estimated project budget of $400,000. A portion of that is funded with a DASNY grant, $125,000. In order to continue the DASNY grant approval process, they must see a line item within our capital project identifying the $400,000 has been set aside for said project. So that is what this resolution is doing, is showing that there's $400,000 for the capital project, some of which will be funded with mitigation fees, some from DASNY grant, and some from the highway fund balance. The intersection is needed for improvement due to proposed economic development and current traffic patterns.
Thanks, Kevin. Any questions for Kevin?
The fund balance is the 56.7 number, Kevin, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt this resolution for budget transfers?
So moved. Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, is there any other business before the board? Any other comments by town residents on any matter you'd like to address to the board? Kathy, I see you have your hand raised. Kathy Eitzman.
Yes, we'll take new members, Mike. I think there's another town board member there that's old enough too, John Hartzell, but I'm not sure who it would be.
I only look old enough.
Billy. All right, yes, thanks so much for all you guys do. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kathy. Anybody else? Yes, Judge Sloat.
Thank you for appointing me to the, as a trustee to the Malta Global Foundries Foundation. I appreciate your trust in me. And then I have a question. I've heard things kicked around today about softball. And most people know that I was involved in softball for over 20 years. As a matter of fact, I was on the committee that brought the state tournament for high school to the Commons back in 2003. And I was wondering, is that what you're talking about, bringing a high school state tournament here? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Have you had a regional?
I don't know.
You see, they went in stages, and I'm not sure about having to have a scoreboard on each field. It might have changed, because it was 2003 when we had the last one here in this area. But I'm sure the state committee, because you bid for it and then you get it, would say what's required. But I'd have to agree with Ted Willett that as far as priorities, the parking should be a priority because that would be used all the time, not just for a one-time-a-year state tournament. Another thing is, we did not play at night. All the state tournaments I went to when my daughter was playing for high school, we never played at night. And that's something that might have changed since 2003. I mean, we went to Binghamton, we went to Syracuse twice, even the regional games. We did not play at night. The fields down at the Commons where she played, they had one field that was lit. It was rarely used. One of the problems is these girls, these high school girls are throwing in the 60s. And it's a short distance, 45 feet from home plate. They need good lighting. It's not like soccer. I mean, that ball is this big, and when it comes at you that short distance, you need really good light. So there's liability questions, and I also know there's standards that you have to follow for that. But I'm sure the LA group knows that. But I just think, I agree with Ted Willett, the parking would be good for everybody all year round. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Judge. Anyone else?
I just would encourage Tim, if you have the time to come back when we're meeting with this, representative group, maybe we can get some more answers to your questions.
Any other comments? Anybody out there? Jamie?
Did you envision executive session? I know there's a personnel matter there. Did you want to take that up, Supervisor O'Connor?
Do we need to take that up? We haven't heard back from our message, have we? I think since we haven't heard back, we might not need to do it
Move we
right
adjourn.
now. Is there a second? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?